Hey guys, my name's Forrest with Rocky Mountain School of Photography, and today we're going to go over my 5 tips for maintaining your equipment in the off season. Now, what is off season for a photographer? It's whenever you're not shooting, which for some people is more than other people, especially right now in this world. So my tip number 1 is to update your camera's firmware and your lens firmware if you have lenses that have upgradable firmware. Now, what does a firmware update do? Well, it does 2 things. Number 1, it fixes any sort of bugs in the software. Sometimes these things, they just don't work quite right, and fixing firmware will a lot of times fix those issues. The second thing, though, is actually adding new features and improving your system. As an example, a lot of lenses, when you update the firmware, they actually become faster at autofocusing or more accurate at autofocusing. Who doesn't want that? Fuji, as an example, releases new features with a lot of their firmware updates, meaning you update firmware and you all of a sudden have new features that your camera can do. The Atomos Ninja, which I'm looking at right here, just released a firmware update, and that actually added a couple new features to that device. So it's definitely worth taking the time, running through all of your equipment that has upgradable firmware, searching to see whether there is an upgrade available, and stepping through that process. Now, on the topic of the process, it's a little bit different every device. So I can't give you like an overall tutorial on how to do it, but it's very simple to follow the little README file that most every manufacturer will provide with the firmware update file itself. So you step through that. It's usually like 4 steps, takes literally 5 minutes per device. Get your firmware updated. Highly recommended. Brings me to tip number 2, which probably goes without saying, but that is clean your equipment. So many people have disgusting gear that's not treated well, it's dirty, it just doesn't look good. Now, obviously, clean your gear. You could just grab some Windex, spray it. Don't do that, but grab some Windex, spray it onto a towel, go to town on the front of your lens. It's not going to be a good thing. So let me give you guys a couple quick tips for cleaning your gear. The first tip is to buy some of these bad boys. These are Zeiss cleaning wipes, and they're awesome. The 100 pack, I think, is like $5. They're really cool. But basically, they're single-use, excuse the box noise there, they're single-use little like moist towelettes, and they're very nice. Use them for the front of your lens first. Obviously, you don't want to use them for a bunch of lenses because any dust you pick up with them on the first go-around is just going to start like scratching and moving down the line. So I like to use a fresh one for each lens, or maybe 2 lenses per wipe. But you wipe the front of your lens off. They're pre-moistened. They work awesome. They're not going to scratch. They're not going to damage the coatings. Highly recommend it. I got these at Walmart, but you can get them pretty much anywhere. B&H has them for sure. So Zeiss cleaning wipes for lenses. Pro tip, I like to use these cleaning wipes once I'm done with the front of the lens. I'll go and clean the eyepiece on the camera as well as any screens, because these are also good for cleaning screens and eyepieces, but I'll always clean the front of the lens first just to ensure that any dust I'm not rubbing onto the lens that got there from the eyepiece or from the screen on the back of the camera. So these are super awesome. Another tip that I have for cleaning your gear is to buy yourself a brush. Give me a second. Brushes look like this. This is from a company called Lens Pens. Let's see if I can get it to focus. Yep, there we go. And we can slide out the little brush tip, and it's got this nice soft bristle brush up here. Now, I'm not going to touch that bristle-tipped brush because we don't want to get oil on it, but using a brush like this to just lightly brush off dust and debris, not from your lens, not from your sensor, obviously that should require more specialized gear, but from the little nooks and crannies around your dials and in your eyepiece and things like that. Dry brush can be super awesome. On the topic of lens pens are actually a great way to clean your lens as well. You can actually unscrew this little cap right here, and there's a little cleaning, like, I don't know, it looks kind of like a plunger on the end of it, but you can use that to clean your lens as well. I prefer the Zeiss wipes. I just use the brush on this lens pen for cleaning. Also, there's another thing that you can use. Excuse my searching for things. I got this on Amazon. This is actually a dry brush on one side. All right, and on the other side, it is a little rubber squeegee type thing, and that can also be used for getting in really tight spaces that a brush won't normally clean. Now, I'm super anal with my gear, so for me to have all my little brushes and stuff, that's just the way I roll. Obviously, most of us have one of these, a rocket blower. If you don't have a rocket blower, I like the ones with the little fins made by Gyotos, or however you say that. These are super sweet, like you just need one as a photographer. These can clean your sensor. They can also clean little nooks and crannies, but together, if you've got some Zeiss wipes, a couple brushes, and a rocket blower, you're going to be able to clean almost anything. Now, sensor cleaning is another topic. I actually made a whole video on that, starting at very non-invasive and going all the way to like a wet swab a couple years ago, or about a year ago. I'll leave that down in the description so you guys can see that down there. That covers all the sensor cleaning stuff. But basically cleaning all my lenses, cleaning all my bodies, cleaning the sensor off, just going to get that camera being perfect, which is so good, because then you can rely on it, which is a nice thing. One other thing I should throw in on the topic of cleaning is clean your filters. These little Zeiss cleaning wipes work great on a filter. If you have like a protective filter on the front of your lens, I don't right now, so I'm not gonna actually touch it, but if you have a protective filter on the front of your lens, you're gonna wanna clean both sides of that filter as well as the lens itself to ensure that you're getting as much sharpness through the front of your lens as you possibly can. That brings me to maintenance tip number 3, which is go through the menu of your camera. So many people that I know, they have no idea what 80% of the menu in their camera does. And it's not because it's complex, it's just because we don't really need 80% of our camera's menu. I know for me, there's like 4 things in the menu that I commonly do, and the other like 86 things I never touch. Well, when you have off time, it's a really great time to learn the rest of your menu. I'll give you guys a couple examples. One thing that a lot of cameras have is the ability to put your copyright information, not visibly, but in the metadata of every image you shoot. So you basically teach your camera what your name is, and it puts your name on every photo that you shoot. Now, I personally do this in Lightroom, and so do most of my students who've set up with me, but you don't actually have to do it in Lightroom if your camera can do it for you, and that's just one of those little menu items that's there. Additionally, autofocus options. So many cameras have so many different customizations for autofocus. Really recommend sitting down with a nice YouTube tutorial on your specific camera and all of the autofocus settings that there are, and literally just sit down and learn it and tune it as good as you can possibly get it. It's such a good time to do that, and there are so many great tutorials out there on your specific camera that you can follow and learn what every single option does. Maintenance tip number 4 has to do with cleaning and maintaining the contacts on your camera. And again, you guys, I tried to think of tips that weren't really that well thought of by most people when they think of maintenance. And this is one that runs you into a lot of problems down the line. So what do I mean by contacts? Well, your battery and your lens both have metal pins where they connect to the camera. And especially on the lens side of things, carbon can build up on those little contacts, and you can run into issues where it doesn't connect cleanly to the camera, and you get error codes, and it shows your aperture as 00 instead of whatever the aperture happens to be. And usually this can be solved very simply by just cleaning those little pins with an eraser on a pencil. Now, you don't obviously want to do this in any way that pencil like eraser dust can fall into your camera or your lens, but if you hold it upside down or as best you can, and you just very lightly rub those contacts with a pencil eraser, again, very lightly, you don't want to go to count, it's not like you're erasing stuff off of a piece of paper, right? But very lightly do that. That can help the connection between the camera and the lens be much more reliable. Same is true with batteries. When you take your battery in and out your camera, it has those little pins as well. So just taking a quick pencil eraser and going over those contacts can help keep things clean. On the topic of batteries, I also recommend this as a good time to charge all your batteries up. A lot of us get in the habit of only using one battery in day-to-day life. Reason being is we usually only need one battery for most of what we do, most photographers. And so oftentimes your second and third batteries just sit in your camera cabinet forever. And this is a great time to get those out, charge them up, and honestly start using battery 2 as your primary battery so that battery 1 can have a little bit of a break. Batteries have a limited cycle life, and the more you can spread the use between all the batteries you own, the better. I personally label my batteries so I know which one's which, and I switch them out routinely so that each battery gets equal uses. I'm weird, I know, it's okay. I'm super anal about this stuff, I get that, but that's why I'm doing this video. So there are our first 4 tips. Tip number 5, which is something that is a little bit different than you might expect, is actually not maintenance, but it's more general photo stuff, and that is to sell gear you're not using. So much in photography, we are acquiring gear and always hunting after the next lens or the next body that will allow us to do some new cool feature that just was released. And a lot of people I know have just stockpiles of old equipment just sitting in their house being unused. The thing with gear is every day that gear that you have that's used is losing value. And so the quicker you can sell it if you're not using it, the better. Now, is this technically maintenance? No, but is it a great thing to do when you're home alone, like waiting for something to do, looking for something to do? Yes, sell that old used gear. My recommendations, you guys, are to sell gear like this on B&H or on eBay or to a friend or family member. That way you can avoid fees. There's a lot of ways to do it. Craigslist is a great way to do it. Obviously, limit your exposure to people for obvious reasons, but as much as you can, selling used gear is a great thing to do in the off time. To learn more about selling used gear, I actually made a whole video on it that I'll link down in the description that just covers all the different ways to sell gear from best way to worst way, because there are some really bad ways to sell gear, and there are also some really good ways to sell gear. Those of you who don't know, my dad was, he's the founder of the school here that my wife and I now direct, and he was like a total gear buyer seller back in the day, and he was really good at it. He was always good at finding deals and then buying those cameras and then selling them for a profit, and that's something that a lot of people can do. It was easier back in the film days because people didn't know what things were worth nearly as much, and now with digital and internet it's much easier to tell. But regardless, getting good at selling used gear is such a good skill to have, and it's so easy. People always think that it's really complicated. You literally just take an hour, you pop it in a box, you send it off, and boom, you get money, which is sweet because then you can buy new gear that you then like more than your current gear, and then you can sell your current gear and get even newer gear. It's a cycle that keeps on going. All right, I know that that's 5 tips, but I want to give you guys one last one just for the sake of doing it, and that is with batteries. Just one little bit of piece of knowledge. Batteries really like to be stored. I don't even need to do that. Do you guys care? Do you care about batteries? I care about batteries. I'm going to do it anyway. Batteries like to be stored at half charge, especially lithium batteries, and there's all different kinds of battery technologies out there, but our camera batteries are lithium batteries. So ideally, if you want to get the most cycle life out of your batteries, storing them at half charge or 3/4 charge is healthiest for the battery. And that's why I say get your batteries out every once in a while and charge them up, simply because batteries sitting there like to degrade over time and like to discharge over time. So getting them charged routinely and cycling them routinely is really healthy for the battery. Also, because I can't resist, never let your batteries sit in a hot car. It will kill them faster than almost anything, especially laptops. If you're leaving your laptop in a hot car day after day, your battery is going to be dead super, super quick. Not just dead like needs to be recharged, but dead like needs to be replaced. So definitely something to keep in mind. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that like button. You know what to do. If you didn't, you also know what to do. If you guys have a question, comment, concern, whatever it is, sorry for bumping the mic there, leave it in the comments section down below. Lastly, hit subscribe if you guys want to stay up to date with future videos. We'll be putting out 1 or 2 videos a week in the coming weeks because everyone is home looking for something to do.